Good evening and welcome. I'm Robert Kellens, board member of NEBiP and director of special initiatives at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. I'm delighted to open our conversation on the precarious state of Black philanthropy tonight. This is a special conversation for me because it happens during Black History Month, during the time that we review our past and reflect on our future. Created in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. The second week of February was proclaimed to be Negro History Week because of its proximity with Frederick Douglass's birthday on February 14th, which Black communities have been celebrating since the late 19th century. Although Negro History Week was met with, at best, a lukewarm reception, Carter G. Woodson kept pushing forward because he believed teaching our history was essential to the physical and intellectual survival of Black people. If a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated, was his quote. It is with that thought in mind that we are closing out Black History Month with a history of our philanthropic giving to ensure that we highlight the assets of our community. When President Gerald Ford recognized Black History Month in 1976 during the celebration of the United States bicentennial, he urged Americans to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. We could not agree more. Our Black philanthropic giving has too often been neglected. So tonight, we're going to lift the too often neglected story of us, all of us, the story of Black giving, or giving Black. We are kicking off the season with the legacy of us, and our impact of philanthropy. We felt that it was fitting because, one, we need a clear-eyed view of our current state. Two, if we want to disrupt the current philanthropic systems, we need to better understand the historic background that has shaped our country. And three, in this environment, we need a better understanding of the future of Black philanthropy. And it is for this reason we are excited to welcome Emmett Carson and Beverly Grant to kick off this season of #Couch Conversations. Most of all, we're delighted that you can join us, and we look forward to having you with us for the remaining programs of our season. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the screen Nicole Price. Nicole is the chair of the board of New England Blacks in Philanthropy and VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Wentworth Institute of Technology.
Thank you, Robert, for your work in our communities and on our board and welcoming our guests. As Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I too am excited about tonight's conversation. Black philanthropy made Black history possible. We are here to discuss and highlight the assets of our communities. We are delighted to have our sponsors join us by supporting tonight's conversation. Tonight would not be possible without the support of our generous partners, sponsors, donors, and community. Thank you most of all to Greater Cincinnati Foundation for leading this conversation. Without you and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, our lens on equity would not be the same. We also want to thank the Endowment for Health, Liberty Mutual, Eastern Bank, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Barr Foundation, the Boston Foundation, the New Hampshire Foundation, the Astra Foundation, the United Way of Mass Bay and Merrimack Valley, the Terry and Brad Bloom Foundation, and the George and Faye Russell. And our partner in this work, the new Commonwealth Fund. Most importantly, We would like to thank you for being here this evening and for your continued support for our conversations. Please give yourselves a round of applause. Now, before we dive in, we need your help. We would like you to take a survey to help inform tonight's conversation. It's not long, it's not too deep, so don't worry. For the first part of this survey, please write in the chat what comes to mind when you hear the term giving Black. I see pride. Very good. Time, talent, and treasure. Legacy. Serving your respective communities. Community. Self-support. Collective care. Community again. Thank you. Thank you. For the second part, we want you to complete the poll that appears on the screen. What type of philanthropist are you? Are you a cornerstone philanthropist? Motivate to give to causes that you believe will support the gradual improvement of society, like the arts, science, civics, and mutual aid? Kinship donor, one who ties their giving to the particular needs of the Black community. They give to the NAACP, to United Negro College Fund, or to a Black church. Or would you consider yourself a sanctified philanthropist, one who is driven by their regular participation in religious services? You give to your church, your mosque, or your house of worship. Please take a moment and answer that question. Our second question is, how are you connected to philanthropy? Are you a member of a giving circle? Are you a Black philanthropic group? Do you give to a donor advised fund? Are you a part of the philanthropic venture group or some other group? Well, I thank everyone for participating in the poll tonight. I am now have the pleasure of introducing our president and CEO, Bethia Carter, who will not only be moderating tonight's discussion, but those answers that you provided to the poll, there will be expansion on that as we continue through this evening.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. And thank you to each and every one of you that are out there. There's so many answers that are coming through. And please keep it coming. Keep this conversation coming. Because, since we arrived on our various shores in various countries and nation states, we've been giving Black to places that have not often been grateful for our gifts, whether it was charity, investments, supports, and sometimes even life itself. Blacks gave more than their share. And as we see the results of the poll that we put up, many of us have served as cornerstone donors, giving to our symphonies, giving to ensure that our communities, our societies are stable. Yet, often we are only seen as sanctified donors. And that's this kind of myth around philanthropy that we want to not only share, but show the fullness of our giving. And as we take a look at the question number 2, what type of philanthropists we are, most of us give with families, but some of us give in other ways. And those are the things that we want to discover and actually have a conversation about as we think about what is Black philanthropy. As you know, there has been a recent refocus in the nation and even global attention on the significance of our giving. Tonight, we will discuss the rich tapestry of Black giving from which we can build a more equitable and inclusive society, and also an understanding of philanthropy in our communities as well. Our conversation tonight will focus on the ingenuity of Black philanthropy and why its legacy is just as important, or maybe even more so today. We will discuss the roots of giving Black and kind of unpack the precarious state that we're in today. As we celebrate Black History Month, we want to close it out with a clear line of sight to our assets and how our past is really a stepping stone to our future. Unfortunately, we have a slight program change. Beverly Grant will not be with us, but it is my pleasure to introduce Emmett Carson. Emmett is an international thought leader in the field of philanthropy. As a founding and former president of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, he led an unprecedented merger of the two largest community foundations in the world. He has published so many articles. He is really the authority on social justice, public accountability, as well as Black giving. He is consistently recognized as one of the most influential leaders in the United States. It is my pleasure to recognize and ask my mentor, Emmett, to join us. Thank you, Emmett.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that overly generous introduction, and I'm so pleased to be with all of you here this evening.
So, thank you. And I'm really excited about this conversation. You know, we think about our month, we think about many of the accomplishments that we've had, we think about sometimes the toil that is taken on our community, but not often do we actually talk about philanthropy itself. And so, as we dive into this history a little bit, what is your earliest memory of Black philanthropy in your own life?
Well, when I was growing up on the south side of Chicago, we had two elderly neighbors on either side of my family's home. And we had a nice sized yard, not a huge yard, but this is a middle-class neighborhood. And throughout the year, whether the leaves were falling in the fall or the snow was falling as it is now in the winter, I came to realize that when my dad said, go rake the leaves, go cut the grass, go shovel the snow, I also had to do both neighbors' property. And it was first a real burden on me. It's like, well, I understand doing our house, but why am I doing two other houses and I'm not even getting any side spending money for it? And my dad's view was you always help those who are in need of some help. And it got to the place where it just became automatic. He'd say, go cut the grass or go rake the leaves. And I knew it meant go get the other two places as well. So I grew up with that as just a family value, that if you can provide assistance for people, I never thought of it as philanthropy. I thought of it as helping. And that's, how I describe Black philanthropy, is that we're helping each other and helping people.
I think that is the thought that everyone has when we think about giving. It was thinking about it's coming from the heart. And even when you may not have much, I love the way you talked about we're raking leaves, we're doing things for our community. So you're kind of like the godfather of the data and really understanding and unpacking Black philanthropy. And as you think about it over its arc, what is Black philanthropy? How would you describe it writ large and its evolution?
So I'd ask everyone to think about Black philanthropy as if it was water. Whatever you pour water in, water takes on that shape. So just think about that for a minute. If it's a cup, it takes on the shape of a cup. If it's a vase, if it's a triangle with an opening at the end, water takes on the shape of the context it's in. And in many ways, Black philanthropy has been water for our community. It has done whatever we've needed it to do based on the external forces that have been on our community. So start back in Africa, philanthropy was always communal, right? It was the villages came together.
Right.
They put everything in the pot. They shared the pot. They shared what they got from hunting. They shared. Slavery happens, this awful thing. We're ripped apart. We're put together from different tribes and different countries with different traditions. But what we know is this communal piece. So as slaves, we have to share. We have to share. If you've got a little extra food, if you need a little extra hand, we have a little separation between the house slaves and the field slaves. But even there's communication and sharing and helping. It is a community. It is Black philanthropy. And then as some of us get free from one path or another, we combine both talent, intellect, and resources. And what do you have? This thing called the Underground Railroad, right? And Black philanthropy becomes volunteerism because people are volunteering to go back into the slave states and bring us free. And along the way, you've got the houses, the way stations that provide food and clothing and false papers. And they take us all the way to Canada. And that's Black philanthropy. And then the Civil War comes and Reconstruction and Black philanthropy through the Black churches, because that's where we control leadership and we have resources, again, communal through that church. We're able to start the first Black banks, the first Black schools, the first Black insurance companies. All of that is birthed out of Black philanthropy and the opportunity coming out of the civil rights movement. And then we have Jim Crow, which is we're going to turn the tide back, and it's separate but equal. And again, it's Black philanthropy that's teaching people how to read. It's Black philanthropy that's building new institutions, financial and nonprofit for us. At one point, nonprofits were so powerful. North Carolina passed laws to prevent Black nonprofits from being created because it was so powerful. And then we get to the civil rights movement. And again, while one or two foundations may have given some modest grants, it was our movement. It was our communal movement. It was the freedom riders and volunteering their time to go down and sit at lunch counters and march and be attacked by dogs and water hoses. That was Black philanthropy. That was mobilized. We had friends, right? We had white friends, we had other friends, but it was our efforts collectively coming together to push that through for housing, for education, for businesses, for business opportunities. And things got better. We got Brown versus Board of Education with all deliberate speed, which took forever and a day. And it never got there. And now we're trying to turn it back. But we had desegregation. And so the power that we had when segregation made us all together in the same church, well, we could move to the suburbs. We wanted our kids to be in the best schools for those who it had attained. And we had some wins. We had political wins. We had inch by inch, year by year. So Black philanthropy started to change. And then we thought we crossed over. Barack Obama won the first election. I couldn't believe it. I'm probably one of the few people in America who said somebody named Barack Hussein Obama is not going to win the election for the president of the United States. I voted for him, but when it came across that he won, my jaw was open. I couldn't speak. And then lightning struck twice. And he won in a bigger margin than the first time. And I said, well, maybe America is different. But just like Reconstruction, history repeats itself. And we had Jim Crow then, and we've got Jim Crow 2 now. And so Black philanthropy has to now reconstitute itself. We thought we had gotten to a place where we could just be individuals. We didn't have to be communal as much. We could live our own vision of philanthropy based not on our common interests as African Americans, but on our individual interests, right? We thought we'd achieve King's dream. I could be judged by the content of my character and not the color of my skin. Unfortunately, I'm here to say we were wrong. We were all wrong. And it's much worse than we ever imagined. We can see video taking of African Americans being murdered. We see the video. We can see an assault on January 6th of our Capitol, and make no mistake, I won't go into detail at this point, but that's about race. That insurrection was because there's a view by a substantial 20 to 30% of white Americans who are uncomfortable with diversity issues. And because of that discomfort and political power, that fear, they believe we've got to take our country back. We got to make it great again. Well, when was it great? Well, back when you didn't have rights. We have people in Congress who hold political power saying we need a national divorce. So those of you who are diverse are over here. Those of us who aren't diverse are over here. We have the FBI saying the #1 challenge to American democracy is domestic terrorism. And those domestic terrorists, if you read what they say, don't believe Emmett Carson, go Google it and read it. They want a race war. They want a white Christian country that does not have rights for us as African Americans, right? African American history is being removed from schools. Oh, that's not true. Well, look in Florida.
Right.
Books are being taken out of libraries that talk about Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron. Books are being taken out of the libraries. That's today. African American men and women are being murdered today by police who represent government. Last point I'll make, 2 more points. Several reports by the military talk about the biggest challenge the military has are these right-wing folk who are learning military skills for the purposes of the race war that they want to perpetrate when they come out of the military. These same people are in the police forces. So I say all that to say, Black philanthropy has to also now have a renaissance back. We've got to reconstitute around a communal, and we've got a lot more wealthy people today with deep pockets. We've got brilliant, smart people today who understand the law and science and medicine. We've got foot soldiers who feel the everyday pain and they don't want their kids to deal with what they dealt with. And we've got to find new vehicles. So the vehicles won't be the church going forward, in my view. The vehicles are going to be like New England Blacks in Philanthropy that can cross economic barriers, income, class, social, bring us all back into that communal way of giving. But the threat is real. It is not hyperbole. I don't say this with any glee, and I'm going to move and get some more lights in here, but it's essential that we understand we are under assault. So I'll stop with that.
You know, we're going to change your name to Reverend Carson.
I don't know about that, but let me
I
let there be light, and there will be light. How about that?
That is a beautiful thing. But you
I'm
know,
with family, so we're figuring it all out.
we are family, and not only are we figuring it out, we are going to march with each other in this new place. You know, you've spoken to so much, particularly the importance of Black philanthropy. When I think about the reports that we do, Giving Black, and really unpacking from 1619, the moment we arrived on the US shores, we've been philanthropic. And philanthropic, to your point, to create those nonprofits. I think that's a piece that we don't often hear, that our nonprofits were prevented, but to create these spaces against this resistance. So this resistance is new, but not so new. Do you think that we're kind of in our, what would we call this, second Reconstruction period? And if so, what does that mean for Black philanthropy? How do we show up differently now than in the past?
It's a very complex question that
Mhm.
that you've just asked. In two respects, it's not different for those who know our history,
Mm,
but we don't know our history anymore.
mm.
And in general, we have not taught our children our history.
Why do you think that is?
For two reasons. One, no one takes pride in telling their children how their grandparents were humiliated.
True.
No one says, hey, let me tell you all the bad things that happened to our family, all the bad things that happened to me, all the slights that I put up with every day,
Mm,
going to the job where I'm viewed as successful, all the micro slights that I get when I go to the restaurant or I go to the store still to buy things. I don't want to celebrate that.
no one's celebrating pain.
Right. But so I don't know how to have that conversation. So that's the first problem. And then the second problem is we thought we thought it was different now. We had a 2-term African-American president and a wonderful badass first lady. That's what we had.
Yeah,
And those adorable kids. It's better now. I don't have to relive that past and relitigate it because it's behind us. And so we've taught our kids who are in their 20s and 30s, some of you may be younger, but 20s and 30s, we taught our kids, don't look forward. The world's in front of you. You can be and do whoever and whatever you want to be. There's still a few idiots out there, but don't let them channel what you can be. And then we wake up one day and we realize these people are buying guns like crazy. They're teaching their 10-year-olds to shoot black targets like us. People are saying out loud the things you couldn't say 50 years ago. 50 years ago, the Dilbert comic script guy the other day, Scott Adams, I think is his name. Hey, don't live by black people. They get the hell away from black people. He said some other stuff that I won't say on the Zoom, but that's what he just said. And people are defending that as free speech. That is the climate and the animosity that exists toward people of color. Where here in Georgia, you cannot give people water standing in line to vote. We are restricted. We have people on record who are saying out loud, we can't win fairly anymore. The only way we can win an election is to cheat. We have to restrict the number of voting places. We don't want you mailing in. That's happening across the country.
Right, right.
Right. In Mississippi, they're taking away the right of the Jackson City, the Jacksonville people to vote for their own judges.
Right.
It's crazy.
It is. And I think what you've highlighted for us, for me in particular, those that forget the past, if we don't talk about it, you're destined to repeat it. So now we're talking about this, right? And not only are we talking about it, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I love the history lesson of the US in a short period of time, but the role of our money. I don't think we can afford to not think strategically about our dollars. And I'm so happy that I don't even want to say you're really this old, that in the 80s, you started writing this data. You started really gathering this information. What inspired that work, particularly as Black philanthropy wasn't really even acknowledged?
I was 10 when I did that. I just
Oh,
need to get that out there. No, it's we were having a debate in our community. It was a very prominent debate, and it was there were a group of people, including African Americans, one actually from Boston at the time, Glenn Laurie, an economist as I
that's
am.
right.
And Glenn had a thesis that the problem with the Black community was that we didn't give back. We didn't help our own. And that was picked up by the conservatives of the day, Black Republican conservatives and others, that the problem for the dysfunction that you could see in some parts of the Black community was a result of we don't help ourselves. And that was popular. And I was just coming out of graduate school, and I was fortunate to be hired by the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And they had several grants, and they said, this is a testable hypothesis. They said, we can actually go out and survey how much do Black people give? How much do white people give? We can look at how much do they volunteer? How much do they give goods and clothing or items to charity? And we can track that over time. And lo and behold, we found if you control for income, African Americans gave more.
That's right.
We gave more money, we gave more time, and we gave more goods and services to people. And I argue, one, Glenn, you're wrong.
Absolutely.
Here's the data. You don't have to guess about it. When it first came out, he said, you had to make a mistake. That can't be true. That data can't be true. And then other people replicated the data and they said, wow, that's true. And then Latinos and Asian communities said, well, they say we don't do that. And they started doing their research and they said, hey, we actually do stuff too. Right? So it came out of that genesis. The thing we have to realize today is we have far more resources at our disposal than any other time in our history.
Right, right.
Right? We have so many more tools to fight back in a nonviolent way. And I say that because if I don't say that, somebody say he was advocating, but no, they're mechanisms. But the time is now because literally things are being rolled back in ways small and large. And I think there's an information gap in our community, right? There's this huge information gap. If you're in a community where it's happening, there's a lot of information about it, but you have no power and clout to do anything about it. But if you're in your bubble, and If somebody raises their shoulder, because I can't see everybody, if your shoulder raises up, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about somebody else. Just be clear, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about somebody else. But if you're in your bubble in the suburbs and you got a nice bank account and your job really isn't at risk, and you're planning your vacation for the summer, or you've already planned it for your tickets, it's not really your problem today.
But
You don't
Doug,
see it as your problem.
but is that really true?
I believe that I've got friends who go, yeah, that's bad. Now we're gonna be in Spain for 2 weeks, and that was horrible. And I gave some group $50, and I gave the art museum $1,000, maybe 2,000. Now I love art. I'm a passionate art lover. But I say this understanding all the feedback I'm going to get for this. Supporting the art museum today is not going to help us with voting rights that are being taken away. It's not going to help us with police violence that's happening. It's not going to help us with the rent prices on low-income communities and people who have marginal jobs or living in cars. And so we've got the triage in ways that we used to do in the past. I can't be as free to have the focus just be my passion anymore.
That's right.
I went to Morehouse, I went to Princeton. I got 2 degrees from Princeton, I got 1 from Morehouse. Morehouse needs me more than Princeton does. That's just a fact.
It is a fact.
I may get more status benefits sometimes from Princeton. Morehouse needs me now.
But let's talk about that status and that belief. Let's take on those cornerstone donors, right? So many of us see ourselves as a cornerstone donor.
Mm-hmm.
So we believe in the institution because the institution is saying to us now, hey, you're right, Black Lives Matter. So institutional philanthropy says, we're here, Black Lives Matter, but what do you think is really the role of institutional philanthropy? Is it protection? Is it connections? I want to be a cornerstone donor. I want to connect with them. What is the lens I should be seeing my work through?
So, excuse me, we have to have a duality today in our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We are both and most of us. We have these. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a really tough part of town. I live in a suburb of Atlanta today. I love the finer things. I used to have 1 coat through graduate school. So we have a duality that we have to acknowledge in our community. And that duality means and it's a plus. It means we have connections into those other spaces to use our voice, to use our leverage, to say to those spaces, hey, I appreciate what you're doing here, but until you do an exhibit that talks about police violence on Black people, I can't be a part of this.
There we go.
Because that's the way you can leverage my interest with what's happening to my community. I'm into this thing. How do you leverage whatever that thing is into ways that bring visibility? Because we still have white friends out there and we need their votes. We need their awareness. And so we're in rooms and country clubs and golf clubs that other folk aren't at. And so are we bringing our full selves into those other spaces to find out allies or to discover false friends?
Now that's something to think about. How are we using this power? And I think that's really what you're aptly describing, power, right? But also when we think about this power, that now we can move in these different spaces, I like the fact that you mentioned you were able to go to Princeton, but Morehouse is where you may be needed. So how are we establishing or supporting our own institutions? Museums take it, whether it's our museums, what should we be thinking about as power?
So again, we got to be real with ourselves. Some of our Black institutions, I think you said, take us for granted.
Mm,
So there's some schools that know I moved before I moved, and they got the next newsletter there. And there are other places still sending the address to where I lived 3 places ago, and I didn't call 4 times.
we're not going to talk about our cousins.
Right, but we have to. Because part of this duality is I know what it's like to be cultivated as a donor. I know what's to be expected. I know the questions to ask with sophistication.
Mm-hmm.
And I want goals and timetables and deliverables. That's how I do my giving now.
Right.
Right, that's what I expect. So that's why I say some of the traditional institutions, right? Well, I can't access something online that I want to know. Well, that's not acceptable today. It's just simply not acceptable today. So we need new institutions, again, that are formed with a different sophistication, a different level. We have to invest in them to provide that kind of service. And then they have to take bold stances. The reason why the churches were able to take such stances during the civil rights movements and before was because we paid the minister.
Mm.
Right? My dad used to say the person who pays the piper calls the tune. We paid the piper.
Right.
The piper could go out and say all the things we wanted to say, but we need to keep our jobs.
Right.
We need people like you today to be that person who can speak truth to power. And by doing that, you and other forms, these communal forms of Black philanthropy, will leverage and make it acceptable for institutional philanthropy. They are never going to be at the front edge in general. No. They have too many constraints. And I say that as a former CEO of the largest community foundation in the world. Prior to that, the Minneapolis Foundation. Prior to that, I was at the Ford Foundation. They are never going to be at the forefront, particularly at this moment when we are in so much debt. I date myself. What was it? Danger, Will Robinson, Danger. If you're laughing on that sci-fi show, Lost in Space and the robot, that's us today. And I say it in a funny way, but I am serious. We have never been under assault like this so openly in any of our lifetimes.
Right.
And until we sort of understand the level of the threat and really appreciate what's going on, we don't have the will to coalesce, right? Because we're water. And so the forces are pressuring on us. And so this is part of that conversation now to get us to go, really? That's happening? Really? That went on? Really? That we came this close. And I know nonprofits shouldn't get involved in electioneering. And I think that's a good rule. But you shouldn't be stupid to what you see in front of your face. We came this close to electing Herschel Walker, who tried to blow his ex-wife's brains out, who lied on 50 different things. That is the venality, that the venom that people have for our community, that's okay. And so until we start to look at these things and understand what they're saying about what this strong 20 to 30% of white Americans and the fear and the anger that they have toward us, and that they're willing to lie, cheat, steal
Mm.
an election and change the rules to deny our voice. We're back in Jim Crow. And it's easier to protect and keep it than it is to lose it and try to get it back.
Right, right, right. You know what you're making me think about is going back to this title, the precarious state of our philanthropy. Like, we can't afford to play. We can't afford to look away. We can't afford to think it's going to be all right. So, as you're thinking about where we are today and these precious dollars we have, what is it that we should do now? And how do you see the future of Black philanthropy?
Well, I think the future of Black philanthropy will remain strong, whether it's Black philanthropy directed toward Black interests is the question.
Mm,
I well, Black philanthropy is the giving.
right
It's not necessarily the receiving.
there.
So we've had multiple donors who are giving, African American donors who are supporting major initiatives at white institutions.
Mm,
I don't say that as being bad. That was their passion. That was what they were interested in. They went to the school. They had an affinity. The school was willing to do something that another school wasn't willing to do. So I'm not saying it as a negative. We can't afford that anymore.
mm,
We need to talk to them. Again, it's that information and awareness. Are you aware where we are today as a people? Do you know what's at stake today? Right? So, and then they can leverage like Madam C.J. Walker did, right? Who's very, she was communal. She's
mhm,
one of the wealthiest women in the world during her time. When she built the schools, she put up a certain amount of money, but she insisted that the community, the local community, match her gift so that they would have ownership in the local schools, right?
mhm.
Our wealthy today, this is my thing. I'm putting my name on it. And that's the white model of top-down philanthropy.
Mm,
And when things were okay, or we thought things were okay, that was fine.
mhm,
But now we need communal philanthropy to bring the community back together.
mhm,
Live your life, take your trip, do your thing, but make your philanthropy, structure it in a way
mm.
that brings people in. And if you do that, we're going to be stronger. Institutions like yours are going to be stronger. And that's what we have to do. There's Tony Coles. He's got a group of people now. Those of you who don't know him, he's a scientist in the pharmaceutical area. He's brought a bunch of wealthy people around, and they're trying to influence elections. It's not philanthropy by the law because they're not getting charitable deductions, but they're also doing some economic development things. So we've got to figure out the bridges between those with means and the broader community to leverage against the common assaults that we're all facing.
That's what we're trying to do. And we're so happy that you are here to help us not only think this through, but strategically plant the stories, the information, and the data together. So as you're thinking about building that bridge, one of the pieces of work that we've been thinking about is an alliance for Black community. How do we have an intergenerational conversation, an economic conversation about where we're going? And how do you see us really establishing better power, so to speak, through not just supporting the large institutions, but the small institutions, the Black-led, the bold institution, Black-led owned developing institutions? Should we look for partnerships with the white institution and our bold institutions? Do we primarily support our bold? How are we bringing our power to this? The little bit of power that, I wouldn't even say a little bit, the power that we have.
Yeah, I'll throw out an idea, but it will take a group of people really, spending some time and developing a strategy, right?
Ready.
But I think it has to be local and work out.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to find some communities across the country, identify those, and then identify institutions that have ready leadership, not leadership that you have to develop, but people who get it. And but for resources, they're ready to do what's necessary to create the conversation, to spur the debate, to make the dynamic happen. And then bring in national people to help support those local efforts, where those national people don't have necessarily voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I say national people, I mean African Americans with wealth, to say, hey, get behind this thing with this local leadership that's ready, thoughtful, and can execute. And we've got projects for you, and they will match your money with local people who have ownership,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because books are getting removed to Black people today. That shouldn't be a hard sell to somebody of wealth to say, really?
Right.
And you're going to raise attention and fight for that, or put them online where people can access them. Right? We've got new tools, right? So I don't know that I have to fight the library thing. I can say, hey, here are all the books online to you free.
Right.
Right?
You,
So
you're right. You're right. I just want to make sure that it's 7 o'clock. We want to open this up for questions. And as we are waiting for questions to come in for Reverend Carson here, um, you are so right. And what you brought up for me is Scott Adams. So I listened to his speech, and now he's charging people $5 to come to his website and see his cartoon and see his work. And I did some quick math, right? If 15 million people pay $5 to go to his site, he's back to 75 million. He just made an additional 75 million, which is his net worth.
and with that, what does it tell you about the people who are
That's
doing it?
right.
Right? It's okay, he's gonna get money. And that's just a horrible thought.
Right.
But what does it say about 15 million are doing it to make a statement to the rest of us?
That's right.
That's what this statement is. It's a statement to say, we agree with you that the best thing you can do is get the hell away from Black people. Here's $5 in support of that. And the internet facilitates that. How do we say, give $5 and we're gonna make sure a kid gets a digital book on Hank Aaron or on 1619, or whatever the thing is, we decide this $5 gets that kid this digital library so that they can learn about Black history.
We can do that.
Yeah, we can do
We
that.
have to think differently. We
Yeah.
can do that. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Do Black people, one question that came in, do Black people need to separate themselves from other communities in order to be successful?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is we have to be smart in our alliances, right? And so different communities have different alliances. And I don't know that being at war, for lack, or being in conflict with other communities, right? I'll give you one example, just very quickly. There is an ongoing thing between African Americans and Mexicans. It's just an ongoing thing in a lot of communities. There's a tension. Who's ascendant? Who's got voice? Who's got power? Most African Americans don't realize that first, half of Mexico got stolen by the United States. So, you know, all those funny names like San Jose and San Francisco and, you know, New Mexico and all those states. Well, they used to be part of Mexico. That's why they have those names, and they were their cities.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pass that history test, do you know why Santa Anna went to war against the United States? It's because the Southerners brought slavery into Texas.
That's right.
They lost half their country fighting against slavery being reintroduced after they kicked it out of Mexico. If you look at their health outcomes around diabetes, obesity, heart disease, they look just like us because they came from the same tribes in Africa like us.
Mm-hmm.
If we were taught that history, that they went to war long before we had our Civil War, fighting against slavery, that they came from the same tribes, the same rice dishes we love, they love, and it has the same health impacts on both of us. We might look at Mexicans a whole lot differently, and they might look at us a whole lot differently in how we talk about how we live in the United States. So I think there are ways to create bridges, but we don't understand the history of what happened to people here and how that relates to how we got treated and they got treated, how the Chinese got treated, building the railroads, and we get it, well, that wasn't slavery. No, but it was really bad too. Right? The Native Americans had their land stolen and they're still having stuff happen to them. Mm-hmm. Right? And again, they've got the diabetes, the obesity, the alcohol, right? Same blood chemistry because they were Indians and Mexicans and they came mixed with slaves. Mm-hmm. So I think there are bridges to these groups, but we've got interests, they've got interests, they don't always coincide, and that's okay. Right? We don't always love everybody in the family, but that doesn't mean they're out the family. They're just on the outs for a little bit.
Well, let's talk about family for a moment, or how we can. One question that came in: how do we, as Black people, learn to trust our Black-focused institution and really advocate for them in philanthropic giving? What can we do? Should we, even as NEBiP, put up a list? Is there someone how do we restructure this?
So the challenging word in that is the word trust. Because it implies we don't, right? I trust some and others I don't. And some I trusted, lost it, and some I didn't have it, earned it. So it's a moving thing. It's not static. And so the question is, the first thing you all could do is say, here's a 4-part, 5-part test to apply to any nonprofit you're thinking about giving a gift to. And it's easy, it shouldn't be hard. Or you can send them an email and ask them to answer these 5 questions for you. And if one said, if they fail on one of those, don't give a gift, right? Or you can give a rating and say, which I think is more complicated, but it ought to be easy for people. And then you can create a chat room where people can say where they've had a good experience with an organization. And it has to be curated, and that takes time. But you could say, in this community, here are the 3 biggest issues. There's police violence, there's voting rights, there's water rights in Jacksonville, right? Whatever the issues are, here are 5 good top tier organizations with a brief summary of what they're doing. You can trust them. We have vetted them. We trust them. They do it a little different way. They climb the mountain, but you find the one in this 5 that works for you.
Right.
And when you give them a gift, tell them we gave the gift because you recommended them. Because what that does is do a feedback loop. Now you're accountable. And others will want to get your recommendation. And when somebody messes up and you take them off your list, people are gonna say you're holding them accountable, and that's why I trust you. But the things like that to rebuild communal and together.
Right. And I love the fact that you said we can do this. You know, for everyone that's out here, this is something we can do together. This isn't just an our thing or a his thing. This is something we can do together. And I want to talk more about this communal piece. You use the term communal philanthropy. What, in your view, is communal philanthropy, and how does it differ from traditional philanthropy?
Well, you know, traditional philanthropy coming from Europe was always hierarchical, right? The king gave to the people. Marie Antoinette didn't give to the people, and off with her head. The Pope had arms, right? So it was those who had the largesse gave to those at the bottom, right? Well, again, in the village, you had the king, you might have had the village elder, but they weren't the kind of discrepancies and not the kind of power dynamics. And certainly once we got here, for slaves from different villages and different parts of Africa, there was no hierarchy. Everybody's getting the snot kicked out of them every day. So you're not the boss, I'm not the boss, you might have been king, whatever, but now you with me, we in it together. And then again, these external forces shaped us to say we have to do it together. It was the belief that we didn't have to have that. I could be hierarchical. I could do my own thing. I could make my own gift, put my name on the sign. And I felt good when that happened. And it was okay. And now we got to navigate both. We're never going to be all communal again. But we can say, particularly to the wealthiest among us, that we can't afford for you to be hierarchical like you've been the last 10 years. Our community can't do that. And it may be your kid driving the car, Tyree Nichols, black cop or white cop, but the system and the culture of police violence comes down on your kid. So we need you. Your family back in where you grew up in the South or on the South side of Chicago, they're not going to be able to vote. Their rights are being taken. So we got to get that awareness that they live in these bubbles. And I'm not bashing them. Wealthy white people live in bubbles, right? They live in bubbles. And there used to be more things to pierce the bubble. They used to be in the church. They used to be in the same schools. They used to live in the same neighborhoods. They used to eat at the same restaurants. There were things that pierced the bubble where they've had some notion of what the larger community dealt with. We had Jet Magazine and Ebony and right. We had things that connected tissue. We don't have that anymore. And so we got to reconstitute neural paths, right? They talk about neurons in the brain, the more neurons, the smarter you are. Well, the more connections we can create as a community, the stronger we're going to be. And I think they're going to have to be new neurons. The old pathways, I think, are too fraught and too troublesome. I wish they weren't, but that's my view of it. And that newer organizations like yours are the future, that don't come with all of the history and the baggage and the other things, that can move fast and can respond to where people are, not to where we think they used to be.
Emmett, we could talk all night, and I thank you so, so, so much. You know, I have to admit, I feel like I went to church.
Well,
Not only did I learn a few things, I'm inspired. I feel like I just feel like we need to go out and share this gospel. It's not just the work that we're doing here at New England Blacks in Philanthropy, but it's the work that we need to do globally and really connect each other. You know, 3 things that you said that was really sticking with me: reconstituting those connections. How are we doing that across economics, across communities, across ethnic backgrounds? How are we reconnecting? And how are we using that to burst these bubbles, that we can sit in a reality and understand not only it could be my child, it could be me. I am Sandy Bland. I am Sandy Bland. And I think as we seek to do this, I think it will take away and understand the precarious place we're in. We can't afford to be blind to just think our money will be okay. We have to shepherd our philanthropy. We have to make it communal. We have to think about, even if you're giving to the symphony, what is the symphony doing in our Black community? What is the symphony saying to Black children? And I think that idea of communal philanthropy that came on these shores when we came on these shores, this way of horizontal, that the giver and the receiver is the same, we've got to put that into the forefront. And we thank you so, so, so much. We look forward to working with you to help us really reshape how we're doing our work. We're looking forward to working with the audience to really help us think this through. But I think you're right. We have the power to change this. We have to trust ourselves. We have to trust the community. We have to hold each other accountable. And I think there's a way that we can take the precariousness away and make this serious about our philanthropic dollars.
And but before we end, if I could take a personal moment of personal privilege on 2 very quick points. One, I want to thank you for all the leadership that you've been doing. I known you from the beginning.
You did. You were my first speaker.
What you've achieved over that period of time has been nothing short of phenomenal. So I want to say congratulations. And secondly, about a week ago, we lost a giant in this field, Ambassador James Joseph.
Yes.
Many of you may not have ever heard of him, but he was ambassador to South Africa when Nelson Mandela was released. Before that, he was the first African-American to head the Council on Foundations. And before that, he created the Association of Black Foundation Executives. And so he was a leader for Black philanthropy. He was a leader of self-determination, preacher as well. And so I just, for those of you who don't know him, Google him. But we could not have this event without at least acknowledging his lifelong contribution to Black philanthropy. So thank you for allowing me to say that.
Actually, we're on the same page. At the end, we were going to talk about this program is really dedicated to him.
Oh, fantastic.
Would be here without him.
Yeah.
He walked out of Council and Foundation, and the other 13 people that walked out. It changed philanthropy. And I think we need to think about not only just all the great inventors and other people that did work, but philanthropy, Black philanthropy, has always been there as the wind underneath all of those Black wings to make sure that we were there. Thank you. And I really do.
He was the first one to fund the National Black United Fund.
That's right.
That took off in New Jersey and California, and the one in LA still exists. So
That's right. None of us. And AFI would not exist,
right.
from which we all sprung.
Mhm.
Without AFI and the work of AFI, none of the BIPs, none of the local conversation that really supported Black grant makers and
Mhm.
supported our organization would exist as well. So thank you for bringing that up, and we will talk about him again at the end, because we just can't talk about him enough. But most of all, we can't thank you enough. Thank you for opening our hearts, our minds, and more than that, putting forth this call to action. We can talk all day, but it's the action that counts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we look forward to working with you. We look forward to not only supporting your next venture, but also keeping you close to us as well. Thank you so much, my mentor, my teacher.
Thank you all.
So, what can I say? That was an amazing conversation. And we try a little bit to put our conversation in action. And so we have a little bit of a treat tonight that we would like to share with you. Many of you know that at the beginning of this month, we launched the Community Sentinel Awards to highlight the assets of our community, highlight the people that are doing this work that we have talked about earlier in this conversation, that communal giving that they give of their time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. And so we know that our actions today will become history that we will celebrate in the future. And that's why we felt it was important to close out this conversation on Black History Month, really celebrating our Black philanthropy. And another way that we want to celebrate this is the Sentinel Award that we will be giving out tonight. The Sentinel is a statue created by the late sculptor Fern Cunningham, who lived in Boston, Massachusetts, as an elementary school art teacher and a commissioned sculptor. But this piece she created from her heart. No one paid her. She gave her time, talent, treasure to create this reminder, this sentinel, a protector who respects and admires the assets of the community. And when we put out the call that who would represent a sentinel for us today, the community answered. We had 29 nominations, of which 11 became semifinalists, who were voted by more than 3,000 visitors to our website. Tonight, we are honored to have the 5 sentinels that rose to the top through their voting online and also their service to our community. But most of all, we thank everyone, all 29 people that were nominated, that showcase what giving Black looks like. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all that you do. And we thank the community for participating in this process and selection. So you will be able to visit our website to see all of the nominees and also to learn more about these sentinels in our communities. But for this evening, we're going to describe 5 of them, 5 that were chosen for their outstanding efforts. And we congratulate Anthony Britt, Brandy Brown, Terry Carter, Tanisha Nash Lard, and Sandra Elaine Scott. We're just overjoyed to have you with us here tonight. Thank you so, so much for all that you do. And please feel free to go into the chat room to congratulate our Sentinels that are here with us tonight that really rose up to the top. And we're honored to have one awardee speak to what this means to her. Tanisha Nash Lard would say a few words about being chosen as a Sentinel. Tanisha.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. First and foremost, I just want to thank you, Bathia, and your colleagues for creating this. To be honest, I had no idea that this was a thing. until I got the email saying that I was a semifinalist. So I must shout out my nominator, JJ, for thinking of me and knowing not to tell me about it. So that was very surprised. And I also want to shout out the Nubian Square Sends partners, Richard Taylor, Kai and Chris Grant, and Stephen Rogers, who recruited me to my newest role as inaugural president and CEO of the Greater Roxbury Arts and Cultural Center, because next week makes just 3 months on the job, which was why I was so grateful to be considered, as I'm new to Boston, but certainly not too new to this work. So from my point of view, the Community Sentinel Awards nomination and voting process was not only an opportunity to introduce myself to the greater Boston community, but also a way to build community with the other purpose-driven people who share my passion for giving back. I watched all the videos of all the semifinalists, and I reached out to every single one of them because I was so, and they're shaking their head because I was in their DMs, as it goes on LinkedIn, and I really think that that was the point of the awards, to build community for people who are doing purpose-driven work. And I look forward to meeting with every single finalist. And again, I want to thank the New England Blacks in Philanthropy for really bringing us together, because I think collectively, we all define what it means to give Black.
Thank you so, so, so much. And we look forward to not only welcoming you more to our city, but also sharing our gifts with you as well. And I love the fact that you mentioned other sentinels in our community, like Richard Taylor, who has been fighting this fight for so long, who is also a mentor of mine, like Ms. Grant, and who has been toiling and ensuring that our community is here, and particularly the arts. And Richard has been promoting the arts, but also he's like that communal person that supports community, politics, organizations. And so we're delighted that and this is exactly what we wanted this award to be, to not only think about who's the guardian, but how do we highlight the work that we're doing. And speaking of the work that we're doing, we're so grateful to Mr. Alvin Terry, who is the husband, or was the husband of the late sculptor Fern Cunningham Terry. We want to thank you so much for not only being here with us tonight, but also allowing us to use this image. When we called him, he was not only delighted to be a partner, not only did he say yes, he said he thought this was a great idea. So to each and every one of you, we would be here all night if we had everyone speak, but Anthony, Brandy, Terry, and Sandra, my dear, dear friend, one of the first individuals I met when I arrived here. Thank you for all you do in our community. Thank you for being guardians over us, over our culture, over our work, and for all that you do to ensure that we are moving forward. We're delighted to kick off this award this year. We think this is Black history. This is the work that we do. What we're celebrating here will be remembered for many, many years to come. So thank you to each and every one of you. So as we wrap up this evening, I'm hoping that your soul was fed as well. What an amazing closure to Black History Month 2023. Again, we want to thank all of our sponsors who made this program possible. We want to thank all of the people that joined us this evening to listen to this conversation. I saw that the chat room was just overflowing with ideas and thoughts, and we're going to lean into you. This is not the last that you've heard of us. We look forward to working with you to really figure out, how do we create a more communal philanthropy that represents us and our community? How do we move from this space of being in our precarious state to a space that is strong, that's influential, and seeking to inform, reform, and transform our community? We have that power. We have that power within us individually, but more We are more blessed to have this power collectively. So thank you again to each and every one of you who joined us this evening. Thank you for all the leaders that are here. We are a leaderful movement, and we also recognize that each and every one of you are sentinels in your community. We look forward to being with you and seeing you at our future conversations. We look forward to hearing your stories of giving Black throughout the year. Please stay in touch with us by visiting our website, NEBiP.org. You'll also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Good night, and thank you for giving Black.